To step into the world of 50,000 years ago is to step into a different geological epoch, the late Pleistocene, and a vastly different reality for humanity. This was a world gripped by ice. Massive glaciers, miles thick, blanketed much of Europe, North America, and Northern Asia, locking away vast quantities of the planet's water. This resulted in sea levels that were over 100 meters lower than they are today, exposing vast coastal plains, connecting continents, and creating land bridges where oceans now flow. The map of the Earth was unrecognizable. Australia was joined to New Guinea in a continent known as Sahul, while Siberia and Alaska were connected by the vast, treeless plain of Bering. The British Isles were not islands at all, but a peninsula of the European continent. This was not a silent, empty world, but one teeming with a spectacle of life that would stun the modern observer. It was the age of the megafauna of giants that roamed the landscapes. In Eurasia and the Americas, mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses plowed through the frozen steppes. Giant elk with antlers spanning over 3 meters, cave lions larger than their African counterparts, and ferocious cave bears that inhabited the deep recesses of mountain ranges were all common. Saber-toothed cats hunted in the forests, and dire wolves prowled in powerful packs. This was a world of profound beauty and extreme danger, where the line between hunter and hunted was constantly shifting. Into this formidable world walked our ancestors. Anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, had already begun their remarkable journey out of Africa, spreading across Asia, Europe, and Australia. But they were not alone. In Europe and Western Asia, the robust and resilient Neanderthals, a separate human species that had adapted masterfully to the cold climates of the Ice Age, had been the sole occupants for hundreds of thousands of years. In parts of Asia, other ancient cousins, like the Denisovans, also inhabited this challenging world. The planet, for the first and only time in deep history, was home to multiple species of humans, each with their own cultures, technologies, and ways of life. The daily life of a human 50,000 years ago was not a simplistic, brutish struggle for survival, as it is often caricatured. It was a complex, nuanced existence, deeply interwoven with the environment, social structures, and a burgeoning symbolic mind. It was a life dominated by the immediate necessities of food, water, shelter, and safety, but also one rich with social interaction, technological innovation, and spiritual curiosity. This was a time when the very essence of what it means to be human, our art, our language, our beliefs about death, and what may lie beyond was being crystallized in the crucible of a harsh and magnificent world. The central theme of death and resurrection is not merely a modern lens through which we view their past. It is a rhythm that would have beat at the very heart of their existence. They witnessed it in the changing seasons, as winter's grip of death gave way to the resurrection of life each spring. They saw it in the hunt, where the death of a mighty beast meant the resurrection of the tribe from hunger and starvation. They pondered it in the stillness of the night, watching the moon die and be reborn in a cyclical dance across the sky. And they confronted it most personally in the loss of a loved one, sparking questions that have haunted humanity ever since. What happens when we die? Is this the end, or is there a form of resurrection, a journey to another world, a continuation of the spirit? To understand their daily life is to understand how this constant dialogue with mortality shaped their actions, their communities, and their earliest beliefs. It is a story written not in parchment, but in stone, in bone, and in the faint. Enduring ochre paintings deep within the sacred darkness of caves. It is a story of how, in the face of an often short and perilous life, humans began to construct meaning, to create legacies, and to dream of resurrection. This is the story of a day in the life, 50,000 years ago. The fundamental unit of life for Homo sapiens 50,000 years ago was the band, a group of perhaps 20 to 50 individuals, all connected by intricate ties of kinship. This was not a random assortment of people. It was a finely tuned social organism where every member had a role to play, and survival was a collective enterprise. The band was family, defense force, school, and the entire known world, all rolled into one. Their survival depended on an intimate generational knowledge of their territory, the migration, routes of herds, the seasonal locations of fruit and nut trees, the hidden sources of fresh water, and the safe places to shelter from both predators and the elements. Within this band, a complex division of labor was already established, likely one of the key advantages that allowed our species to thrive. While the lines were not absolutely rigid, Tasks were often divided by expertise and physicality. Hunting large game was primarily, though not exclusively, a male pursuit. It required immense strength, coordination, endurance, and a deep understanding of animal behavior. A hunt was not a chaotic charge, but a strategic operation. It required days of tracking, careful planning to ambush or drive animals into natural traps, and the courage to confront wounded and enraged megafauna with weapons that required close proximity. The toolkit of these hunters was a marvel of Stone Age technology, far more sophisticated than the simple club and spear image might suggest. The era of 50,000 years ago is known as the Middle Paleolithic to the early Upper Paleolithic, a period of significant innovation. Levallois techniques, where a stone core was carefully prepared to strike off a single pre-shaped flake, were used by both Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. But our ancestors were also refining a new technology, blade production. By striking long razor-sharp flakes from a prepared core, they could get more cutting edge from a single piece of precious stone. These blades were then hafted onto wooden shafts with animal sinew and glue made from tree resin and ochre, creating composite tools that were strong, versatile, and lethal. The spear was the primary weapon, but it was not thrown like a javelin in most cases. Evidence suggests the use of spear throwers, or littles, a simple yet devastatingly effective lever that allowed a hunter to launch a dart with far greater force and accuracy than by arm alone. This technology extended the hunter's reach, a critical advantage when facing a mammoth or a lion. Alongside these weapons, they crafted scrapers for cleaning hides, awls for piercing leather, and burins for engraving bone and antler. Every tool was a product of hours of skilled labor, and they were cherished, repaired, and recycled until they were utterly spent. While men hunted, the role of women was arguably the central pillar of daily life. Their gathering activities provided the majority of the band's calories. Roots, tubers, berries, nuts, seeds, and insects were reliable staples, while a successful hunt was never guaranteed. This economic role gave women significant status and authority within the group. They were the botanists, possessing encyclopedic knowledge of which plants were nutritious, which were medicinal, and which were deadly poison. They processed the food, often using grinding stones to make tough grains digestible. They were the tanners, transforming raw, smelly hides into supple, warm leather for clothing, footwear, and shelter covers using stone scrapers and animal brain solutions. Perhaps most importantly, women were the primary caregivers. In a world with an average life expectancy, likely in the 30s, childbirth was incredibly dangerous for both mother and infant. The survival of children was the survival of the band itself. Women nurtured the young, passing on crucial knowledge through stories and demonstration. They cared for the injured and the elderly, and they likely played a central role in the social and emotional cohesion of the group. The daily rhythm of the camp was set by their activities. The chatter and laughter of people working together, the sound of stones cracking nuts, the smell of food cooking over a fire, and the sight of children playing under the watchful eyes of the entire community. This community was not an island. Bands were part of a larger tribe or network, connected through language, shared culture, and kinship ties. Interaction between bands was essential for survival. It was through these meetings that people found mates, preventing harmful inbreeding. They traded not only goods, exotic shells, high-quality flint, ochre pigment from distant sources, but also ideas, technologies, and stories. This exchange of information was a rapid form of innovation, allowing a new tool, design, or a better hunting technique to spread across vast distances over generations. In a world of extreme scarcity and danger, these social networks were a safety net. If a band's territory was struck by drought or fire, they could call upon obligations of kinship with neighboring groups for temporary access to resources, ensuring the lineage did not simply vanish. This complex social and technological world was the stage upon which the drama of daily life was played out. It was a life of constant movement, as bands were nomadic or semi-nomadic, following the food sources with the seasons. Their shelter was often temporary caves and rock overhangs when available, or quickly constructed huts made of mammoth bones, branches, and animal skins. Every day was a lesson in practicality and resilience. But underpinning all this physical effort was a growing cognitive world, a mind that was beginning to see patterns and meanings. Beyond the immediate, a mind that was starting to paint its dreams on the walls of the world and ask questions about the finality of death. To live 50,000 years ago was to live with a constant low-level hum of danger. The modern world has largely insulated us from the immediate threats of predation, accident, and infection, but for our ancestors, these were daily realities. Theirs was a world where a simple misstep, a minor cut, or a moment of inattention could lead to a painful, debilitating, and often fatal outcome. The line between life and death was razor-thin, and this ever-present vulnerability profoundly shaped their psychology, their social bonds, and their view of the world. The most dramatic threats came from the megafauna that shared their environment. While humans were apex predators, they were not always at the top of the food chain. A hunt for a mammoth was not a guaranteed victory. It was a high-stakes gamble. A cornered woolly rhinoceros could charge with enough force to kill multiple hunters. Cave lions, larger and more powerful than modern African lions, saw humans as potential prey, especially the young, the old, or those caught alone. Encounters with these giants are frozen in time. Footprints in a French cave show a journey of a child walking alongside a cave bear, and then stopping, perhaps in fear, before quickly leaving. In another, the skull of a Neanderthal shows crushing injuries, consistent with the paw swipe of a cave lion, followed by healed bone, a testament to both the violence of the attack and the care the individual received to survive it. But it was not only the large, charismatic predators that posed a threat. Hyenas were formidable scavengers and hunters, capable of crushing bone with their powerful jaws, and they would not hesitate to challenge humans for a kill or attack the vulnerable. Wolves, though often competing for the same prey, could be dangerous in packs. Even herbivores were perilous. A wounded bison or a protective aurochs mother was incredibly fast, agile, and capable of goring with deadly efficiency. The landscape itself was a hazard. A fall while climbing a rocky outcrop, a misstep into a hidden sinkhole, or getting caught in a sudden blizzard without shelter could mean certain death. However, the most insidious and constant threat was not from large animals, but from the smallest of creatures: bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Without any understanding of germ theory, infection was a mysterious and terrifying force. A simple cut from a stone tool, a scratch from a thorn, or a bite from a rodent could become infected, leading to sepsis, gangrene, and a painful death. Dental problems were common due to grit in food and lack of hygiene, and an abscessed tooth could lead to a systemic infection that was utterly untreatable. Gastrointestinal illnesses from contaminated water or spoiled food would cause debilitating dehydration, particularly dangerous for the very young and the very old. Broken bones, while they could and did heal, evidenced by many skeletal remains, often healed imperfectly. A badly set leg fracture could leave an individual permanently lame. A death sentence in a world that required constant mobility to follow the food sources. For the group, this created a difficult calculus. A severely injured member slowed everyone down and consumed resources. Yet, the abundant evidence of healed severe injuries in Neanderthal and early Homo sapiens skeletons is one of the most powerful testaments to their humanity. It shows they practiced compassion and care. They did not simply abandon the wounded. They provided them with food, water, protection, and time to heal. This empathy, this investment in the survival of an individual who may never again contribute fully to the hunt or the gatherer, is a defining feature of our species and our closest cousins. This environment of constant peril forged a specific kind of awareness. Their senses were perpetually tuned to their surroundings, the alarm call of a bird signaling a predator's approach, the distant sound of a cracking branch, the subtle change in the wind's direction, the faintest scent of smoke or carrion on the air. They were masters of reading tracks, not just to hunt, but to understand who or what had passed through their territory and how long ago. This hypervigilance was exhausting but essential. It was the price of seeing another sunrise. This relentless confrontation with mortality, with the sudden and often violent end of life, made death a familiar, if never comfortable, presence. It was not an abstract concept, but a visceral reality. They saw animals die to become their food. They saw family members succumb to injury, illness, or the attack of a beast. This intimacy with death forced them to confront it directly. It demanded an explanation, a ritual, a way to process the loss and the fear. It is from this fertile ground of daily peril that the first seeds of spiritual belief and funerary practice would grow. representing a profound attempt to assert meaning and control over the one inevitable event that seemed so random and so final. The handling of the dead became the first, tentative step toward the concept of resurrection. The most profound distinction between Homo sapiens of 50,000 years ago and their other human contemporaries was not merely physical. It was a cognitive revolution, manifesting in an explosion of symbolic thought. This was not just about surviving the physical world. It was about beginning to interpret it, to represent it, and to seek meaning beyond the immediate. This burgeoning consciousness left behind a trail of artifacts that speak louder than words, evidence of a rich inner life, a sense of identity, and the first inklings of a belief system that could encompass the mystery of death. The most personal expression of this symbolism was adornment. Across sites from Africa to Europe, we find evidence that humans were deliberately modifying their own bodies. They were creating beads from shells, animal teeth, ivory, and bone, carefully drilling holes into them and stringing them into necklaces, bracelets, and anklets. Ochre, a naturally occurring pigment ranging in color from yellow to deep red, was ground into powder and mixed with animal fat or water to create paint. They used it to decorate their skin, their clothing, and their tools. This was not merely decoration for its own sake. This was symbolism. Adornment conveyed social status. A successful hunter might wear a necklace of lion teeth. It signified group membership. A specific style of bead might identify someone as part of a particular band or tribe. It could denote life stages, like puberty or marriage. By painting their bodies, they were transforming themselves, perhaps for ritual, for war, or for hunt, taking on a new identity that transcended the everyday. This symbolic explosion found its most breathtaking expression in art. In the deep, silent darkness of caves, far from the living areas, they began to create. Using charcoal, ochre, and engraved stone tools, they painted stunningly accurate and powerful images of the animals they lived alongside and depended upon. Mammoths, bison, horses, deer, and lions. The caves of Chauvet in France, dated to around this period, are a time capsule of this artistic Big Bang. The paintings are not simple childish sketches. They are sophisticated works that show perspective, movement, and emotion. They used the natural contours of the cave walls to give their paintings a three-dimensional quality, as if the animals were emerging from the rock itself. The purpose of this art remains a subject of debate, but it was almost certainly not art for art's sake. It was likely deeply ritualistic and spiritual. By painting an animal, perhaps they believed they were gaining a measure of power over it, ensuring a successful hunt. The caves themselves may have been seen as sacred portals to a spirit world, a womb of the earth where one could communicate with the forces of nature. The act of painting, illuminated by the flickering light of fat-burning stone lamps, would have been a powerful, sensory, and communal experience, accompanied by chanting, music, and perhaps shamanic trance. Simple flutes made from bird bone, found at sites of this age, provide evidence of music. Another layer of symbolic expression used to unite emotion and ritual. This ability to represent the world symbolically is inextricably linked to the development of complex language. While other hominins likely had some form of communication, the archaeological record of Homo sapiens suggests a linguistic leap. Language is the ultimate symbolic tool, allowing for the sharing of abstract ideas, the planning of complex tasks, the transmission of knowledge across generations, and the telling of stories. It was through language that they could discuss the meaning of the paintings in the caves, recount the epic tale of a hunt, express grief for the dead, and formulate the first myths about the creation of the world and what might happen after death. Language allowed them to build a shared understanding of reality that was richer and more layered than the mere facts of survival. All of this, the beads, the body paint, the cave art, the music, the language points to a mind that was now capable of conceiving of the invisible. They could believe in things that were not immediately present, spirits within, animals, forces in the wind and thunder, a connection between the image of a bison and the real bison out on the steppe. This cognitive ability is the absolute prerequisite for any concept of an afterlife. If you can believe in an invisible spirit world that influences your daily life, then you can begin to believe that some part of a person, their spirit, their essence might journey to that world after the body dies. The stage was now set. They had the intellectual capacity, the symbolic toolkit, and the emotional need. The next logical step was to apply this new way of thinking to the most painful and confusing event they faced: the death of a member of their community. Death was a stark and undeniable event. The vibrant, breathing, speaking member of the band was now still, cold, and silent. The body, once a source of warmth and companionship, would quickly begin to decay, a process that was frightening, unpleasant, and seemingly undignified. For a species now capable of symbolic thought, this could not be the final chapter. The profound emotional bonds formed within the band, combined with a nascent belief in an invisible world of spirits, demanded a response. That response was the birth of funerary practices, the first deliberate, ritualized attempts to manage death and assert a belief in some form of continuity. The simplest and most practical response would have been to abandon the body, to move the camp away from the source of disease and scent of decay. But at multiple sites across the world, beginning around this time, we find evidence that they chose a different path. They began to bury their dead. This was a monumental cognitive leap. Burial represents investment, expenditure of precious time and energy for an individual who can no longer contribute to the group's survival. It implies care, respect, and a desire to protect the remains from scavengers and the elements. It suggests a belief that the body itself, or its resting place, held some significance. The burials of this era, particularly those attributed to both Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens, are incredibly revealing. They are not merely holes in the ground. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, a Neanderthal who had lived a life of severe disability, likely blinded by a head injury and with a withered arm, was carefully laid to rest. Pollen analysis from one burial, the famous Shanidar, revealed clumps of flower pollen from plants like hollyhock and groundsel, which have medicinal properties. Was this a deliberate funerary offering? A bouquet of flowers placed on a grave by a grieving companion? 50,000 years before the poetry of such an act was ever written down, the evidence compellingly suggests it was. At other sites, bodies were found buried in a flexed or fetal position, as if tucked into sleep or prepared for a rebirth. They were often oriented in a specific direction, perhaps towards a sacred place or the rising sun. Grave goods began to appear. A hand axe might be placed next to a man, perhaps a tool for his use in a next life. A sprinkling of ochre, the vibrant red pigment, was scattered over the bodies. Red, the color of blood and life, may have been symbolic of a hope for rebirth or a means to spiritually revitalize the deceased. These were not random acts, they were purposeful rituals, repeated across time and space, indicating a shared and developing belief system. These practices represent the very origin of the concept of resurrection. While not the elaborate, theological resurrection of later religions, it was a fundamental belief in a form of continuity. By treating the body with care, by providing it with tools and offerings, and by symbolically linking it to life through ochre and cyclical nature through the fetal position, they were asserting that death was not the absolute end. Something persisted. The spirit perhaps journeyed to another world, a world of the ancestors, or maybe it remained nearby, watching over the band. The body itself, safely tucked into the womb of the earth, might be prepared for a new form of existence. This was the ultimate cultural defense against the terror of oblivion. In a life filled with random, violent death, these rituals provided a framework for grief. They gave the living something to do, a way to channel their pain into purposeful action. They reinforced social cohesion, as the entire band would have participated in the mourning and the burial, reaffirming their bonds in the face of loss. Most importantly, these practices planted a seed of hope. The daily resurrection of the sun, the seasonal resurrection of the plants, and the cyclical patterns of the moon now found a parallel in the human experience. If nature could die and be reborn, then perhaps so could people. The first funerary rites were a declaration of faith made in the face of the unknown, a defiant whisper in the dark that said, "This is not the end." It was humanity's first, tentative step on a long journey to understand the greatest mystery of all. To truly understand this world, we must step away from the grand themes of life and death, and immerse ourselves in the rhythm of a single day. Imagine the pale light of dawn filtering through the entrance of a rock shelter, or through the hides stretched over a hut frame. The air is cold, and the breath of the sleeping band forms faint clouds in the chill. The day begins not with an alarm, but with the natural waking of the body, the sounds of others stirring, and the immediate need for warmth. The first task is to revive the fire. Fire was life itself. It provided warmth against the bitter cold, protection from predators that feared the flame, light to push back the profound darkness of the night, and, most crucially, a way to cook food. Cooking made meat and tubers easier to digest, unlocking more nutrients and killing parasites. The fire was likely kept burning continuously, a precious ember guarded and carried from camp to camp. Someone, perhaps an elder no longer able to hunt or travel far, would have had the important responsibility of tending it through the night. Now, blown into a flame and fed with dry kindling, it becomes the heart of the morning camp. The band moves with a practiced, quiet efficiency. There is no need for lengthy discussion. Everyone knows their role. A group of women and older children, armed with digging sticks and woven baskets, prepares to set out to gather. Their knowledge is immense and specific. They know exactly where a patch of nutrient-rich roots can be found, which berries are ripe in a certain valley, and where the nut trees have recently shed their bounty. They are constantly scanning the ground not just for food, but for other useful materials, specific types of stone for tool making, medicinal herbs, ochre deposits, and suitable branches for making shafts and frames. Meanwhile, a party of hunters readies their equipment. They check the bindings on their spears, ensuring the stone points are secure. They might rub a bit of fat on the leather straps of their atlatals. There is a quiet, focused energy among them. Today's goal might be to check traps set for smaller game like hares or foxes, or to track the movements of a larger herd they've been monitoring. The hunt is not a daily occurrence. It is a planned event that requires patience and strategy. Before they leave, they might engage in a small ritual, a touch of ochre on the forehead, a silent prayer to the spirit of the animal they hope to encounter. Success is never guaranteed, and failure means another day reliant on gathered foods. Back at the camp, the rhythm continues. Younger children stay behind under the watchful eyes of a few adults. This is their classroom. They play with discarded scraps of leather and bits of bone, mimicking the actions of their parents. An elder might show an interested boy how to pressure flake a stone core, guiding his small hands through the motions. A girl might practice scraping a stretch of hide with a blunt tool, learning the techniques she will need as an adult. Knowledge is not taught in schools. It is absorbed through constant observation, imitation, and storytelling. As the sun reaches its zenith, the gatherers return. Their baskets are filled with the day's harvest, roots to be roasted in the fire, nuts to be cracked, and bitter plants that must be soaked in water to remove their toxins. The work of processing food is a central afternoon activity. Stones are used to grind seeds into flour. Hides from previous hunts are stretched and scraped clean. Tools that were damaged are repaired, and new ones are slowly crafted. There is conversation, laughter, and the constant sound of activity. If the hunters are successful, the camp will erupt in excited celebration upon their return. The butchering of a large animal is a communal event, with every part of the creature being used: meat for immediate consumption and drying, sinew for cordage, bone and antler for tools, hide for clothing and shelter. As dusk descends, the temperature drops quickly. The group draws closer to the fire, its light creating a small sphere of safety and community in the vast, dark landscape. This is the time for social bonding. Stories are told, not as mere entertainment, but as the living library of the band. Tales of past hunts, of legendary ancestors, of the tricks of the cunning rabbit spirit, and of the creation of the world are passed down. These stories encode survival knowledge, social values, and the band's history. Someone might play a simple melody on a bone flute. Plans are made for the next day's movement. It is time to move to a new area where the berries are now ripe, or to follow the trail of the reindeer herd. Finally, as the embers of the fire glow and the stars, brilliant and undimmed by any light pollution, wheel overhead, the band settles down to sleep. They sleep close together for warmth and security. The sounds of the night, the howl of a distant wolf, the hoot of an owl, a reminder of the world beyond the firelight. But within this small circle of humanity, there is safety, belonging, and the culmination of another day of resilience. It is a life of immense hardship, but also one of profound connection to each other, to the natural world they depended upon, and to the rhythms of a universe they were only just beginning to understand. It was in this daily existence of practical struggle and growing symbolic wonder that our modern humanity was forged. The world of 50,000 years ago is impossibly remote, a different planet orbiting the same star. The glaciers have retreated, the megafauna are largely extinct, and the other human species have vanished from the Earth, leaving Homo sapiens as the sole inheritor of the planet. It is easy to view this ancient past as a primitive prelude to our modern existence, a series of struggles we have long since overcome. But this is a profound misconception. The lives of those people were not a simple beginning. They were a complex, mature adaptation to their world, and the legacy of their daily existence is not buried in the past. It is etched into our very biology, our psychology, and the foundations of our societies. We carry their world within us. Our bodies are living archives of their struggles. Our physiological responses to stress, the adrenaline rush, the heightened senses, the fight-or-flight instinct, are direct inheritance from a time when such responses were essential for survival against immediate physical threats. Our innate taste for fatty and sugary foods is a caloric imperative from an era of scarcity, now maladapted to a world of abundance. The circadian rhythms of our sleep, tuned to the rising and setting of the sun, are a relic of a life lived by natural light. Even our capacity for endurance running, unique among primates, is thought to be an evolutionary adaptation for persistence hunting on the ancient savannas. We are, in a very real sense, Stone Age bodies navigating a space-age world. The social structures they forged are the blueprints for our own. The fundamental human unit, the family, and the extended kinship group, has its roots in the hunter-gatherer band. Our deep-seated need for social belonging, our craving for community, and our intense grief at the loss of a loved one were honed in the crucible of small group living, where cooperation was not a choice, but a necessity for survival. The egalitarian tendencies seen in many modern hunter-gatherer societies, where resources are shared and leadership is based on merit and respect rather than inherited power, likely have their origins in this distant past. The complex web of reciprocity, of owing and repaying favors, which underpins all human societies, began as a vital safety net between bands in a precarious world. Most profoundly, the cognitive revolution that began 50,000 years ago is the bedrock of our modern civilization. Their development of sophisticated language is the foundation for all human knowledge, science, and literature. The ability to use symbolic thought to represent one thing with another is the basis for mathematics, currency, law, and art. The first bead, the first cave painting, the first burial with grave goods were the primordial acts of abstraction that would eventually lead to writing, to philosophy, to the concept of the divine, and to the exploration of the cosmos. When we ponder the meaning of life or create a work of art, we are operating with a mental toolkit they were the first to assemble. The theme of death and resurrection, which so preoccupied them, remains a central pillar of the human experience. We have built entire religions, philosophies, and cultural traditions around the same questions they grappled with in the flickering light of their caves. Our funerary rites, though infinitely more varied and complex, serve the same fundamental purposes: to manage our grief, to honor the dead, and to express a hope, however defined, that something of the person persists. The concept of sacrifice for a greater good, of an individual's death, ensuring the life or renewal of the community, is a story we still tell ourselves, from ancient myths to modern narratives. To understand their daily life is to understand the origins of our own humanity. It was a life of extreme challenge, but also one of incredible innovation, profound social connection, and burgeoning creativity. They were not crude brutes stumbling toward a better future. They were fully modern humans, intellectually our equals, who applied their genius to the problems of their time. They looked up at the same stars we see today and told stories to give them meaning. They loved their children, mourned their dead, and sought beauty in a harsh world. They confronted the mystery of death and dared to believe in life beyond it. In their resilience, their compassion, and their irrepressible creativity, we see the best of ourselves. Their story is not one of death, but of enduring resurrection, the resurrection of the human spirit across millennia, a continuous thread of hope and ingenuity connecting their world to our own. The echo of their footsteps, both physical and spiritual, is a permanent part of who we are. 50,000 years is an expanse of time so vast it defies easy comprehension. It represents over 2,000 generations of human lives, each born, living, and dying in their turn. The sheer weight of this time could suggest an unbridgeable gap, a silence so complete that nothing of those individual lives could possibly remain. Yet, this is not the case. While their names, their individual voices, and their personal stories are lost to us, their legacy is not. Through the patient work of archaeologists sifting through ancient soil, the analysis of geneticists reading the story written in our DNA, and the contemplative gaze of an artist looking at ochre handprints on a cave wall, we have achieved a form of resurrection. We have brought their world back to life in our collective imagination, and in doing so, we have come to a deeper understanding of ourselves. The quest to understand daily life 50,000 years ago is more than an academic exercise. It is a fundamental human urge to know our origins. It is a journey back to the roots of the family tree, a way to pay homage to the ancestors who, through unimaginable challenges, persevered and ensured our existence. Every time we piece together a stone tool technology, analyze the residue on a scraping implement, or reconstruct the diet from isotopes in a fragment of bone, we are reclaiming a piece of that lost world. We are restoring dignity to their struggle and complexity to their existence, moving beyond the cartoonish image of the caveman to reveal the resilient, intelligent, and deeply human people they truly were. This resurrection of memory provides us with a crucial sense of perspective. In our modern age, dominated by digital screens and global crises, it is easy to feel disconnected from the natural world and from the deeper rhythms of human history. Learning about their lives so intimately tied to the seasons, the migrations of animals, and the resources of the earth wrenches, us, it reminds us that for the overwhelming majority of human history, life was lived this way. Our modern civilization is a breathtakingly recent invention, built upon a foundation that is hundreds of thousands of years old. This perspective can be both humbling and empowering. It highlights our incredible technological progress, while also reminding us of ancient, enduring truths about community, cooperation, and our dependence on the planet. Ultimately, the story of humanity 50,000 years ago is a story of hope. It is a testament to the incredible adaptability of our species and the power of the human spirit to find meaning and create beauty in the face of adversity. They faced a world far more dangerous and unpredictable than our own, yet they did not merely survive, they innovated. They cared for their weak and injured. They created art that still moves us today. They developed spiritual beliefs to comfort themselves in the face of the unknown. They looked upon the same mystery of death that we still confront, and their response was to ritualize it, to question it, and to seed the idea that life, in some form, could triumph. The unbroken thread that connects us to them is not just one of biology, but of consciousness. It is the thread of a mother's love for her child, of the grief of a friend, of the awe felt under a canopy of stars, of the satisfaction of creating something with one's own hands, and of the burning curiosity to understand the world. These are the eternal human conditions. Their daily life was built around these same emotions and impulses that drive us today. In this sense, they are not truly gone. Their resurrection is ongoing. It happens every time we feel a deep connection to nature. Every time we gather with our family and community to share a meal and tell stories. Every time we create art, and every time we honor our dead. They live on in us. By remembering them, we complete a circle that stretches across the millennia, affirming that the human journey, with all its struggle, loss, creativity, and hope, is a single, continuous story that began in the distant echoes of the Pleistocene and continues with unwavering resilience today. Beyond the tangible remnants of stone and bone lies the most fascinating frontier of our exploration, the ancient mind. What did it feel like to be alive 50,000 years ago? While we can never fully inhabit their consciousness, we can infer the contours of their cognitive landscape from the evidence they left behind. This was a mind deeply attuned to patterns, to cause and effect, but operating without the scientific framework we take for granted. This fundamental difference in understanding the world gave rise to a rich tapestry of myth and meaning that governed their perception of reality. Their world was alive with agency. Where we might see a random weather event, they likely saw the displeasure of a spirit. A successful hunt was not just a matter of skill and luck. It was a negotiation, a transaction with the spirit of the animal herd, requiring respect and reciprocity. This worldview, known as animism, is common among hunter-gatherer societies. It posits that spirit or consciousness resides not just in humans and animals, but also in plants, rocks, rivers, and weather patterns. This belief fosters a profound sense of connection and responsibility toward the natural world. You would not take more than you need from a spirit-inhabited landscape, for fear of offending the forces that sustain you. Dreams would have been a particularly potent source of knowledge and fear. In a state between waking and sleep, the mind conjures images of living, breathing, and interacting with the dead and with animal spirits. These experiences felt utterly real. It is easy to see how dreams became a primary piece of evidence for an afterlife or a spirit world, a place one could travel to while the body slept. Shamans or spiritual specialists, individuals perhaps more prone to vivid trance states or epilepsy, likely leveraged this ability to journey and serve as intermediaries between the band and the spirit world. They would interpret dreams, guide rituals, and attempt to influence the unseen forces that governed their fate. This animistic, dream-informed worldview is the fertile soil from which mythology grew. The stories told around the fire were not mere fiction. They were the foundational texts of their culture. They were theories of origins. How did the world begin? How did humans come to be? Why does the sun cross the sky? Why does death exist? Myths provided the answers. They often featured archetypal characters, a trickster who brought chaos and change, a great hunter in the sky, an Earth Mother. These stories encoded survival information. A myth about a trickster who disrespected the buffalo spirit and was trampled served as a crucial lesson in hunting etiquette and respect for the animal. The cyclical nature of their lives, day and night, the phases of the moon, the turning seasons reinforced a cyclical view of existence. Death was not a linear end but a part of a cycle, akin to the moon waning only to wax again, or winter blanketing the land in silence before the resurrection of spring. This cosmological perspective made the concept of spiritual resurrection, of the soul's journey to an ancestor world or its return in a new form, a logical and comforting conclusion. Their entire reality, from the smallest daily task to the grandest cosmic event, was woven into a single, interconnected, and meaningful whole. Their life was a constant dialogue with the universe, and every action, from painting an animal on a cave wall to burying a relative with ochre, was a sentence in that conversation. The world of 50,000 years ago was not a static paradise. It was a dynamic and often precarious equilibrium. The very conditions that shaped this era of human development were already shifting, setting the stage for profound changes that would ultimately lead to the end of this way of life and the world it inhabited. The story of this period is not just one of human resilience, but also of ecological transformation and loss, a narrative where the concept of death and resurrection applies to entire species and ecosystems. The engine of this change was climate. The late Pleistocene was characterized by dramatic climatic fluctuations. Periods of intense glaciation, where ice sheets advanced, were punctuated by shorter, warmer These shifts were not gradual. Evidence from ice cores suggests that temperatures could swing dramatically in a matter of decades, radically altering environments. A landscape that supported herds of mammoth and reindeer could, over a few generations, become forested, forcing the fauna and the humans who depended on them to migrate, adapt, or face local extinction. This constant environmental instability was a relentless pressure on human populations, demanding flexibility in technology, social organization, and foraging strategies. The arrival and expansion of Homo sapiens across the globe was itself a catalyst for change. The evidence, though still debated, points toward a correlation between human arrival and the extinction of megafauna on continents like Australia and later the Americas. The overkill hypothesis suggests that humans, with their sophisticated hunting techniques and cooperative strategies, placed an unsustainable pressure on slow-breeding species like mammoths and giant ground sloths, while climate change undoubtedly played a concurrent role. The combination of a warming world and a new, highly effective predator may have been catastrophic for these giants. The resurrection of these magnificent creatures remains confined to the realm of fantasy. Their death was permanent, a loss of biological grandeur that reshaped the planet's ecosystems forever. This period also witnesses the gradual fading of our human cousins. The Neanderthals, supremely adapted to the cold of Pleistocene Europe, reached their zenith and then disappeared. The reasons for their extinction are complex and multifaceted. They may have been outcompeted by the more technologically innovative or socially flexible Homo sapiens. They might have been absorbed into the expanding sapiens population through interbreeding, or they may have been particularly vulnerable to the rapid climate changes that altered their preferred steppe environment. Their disappearance marks a poignant moment in human history, the end of a separate, intelligent human lineage. In their death, however, lies a form of genetic resurrection for many people today. as fragments of Neanderthal DNA persist within the genomes of non-African populations, a silent testament to ancient encounters. For Homo sapiens, this era was not an end, but a transition. The pressures of a changing world and the dwindling of the great herds may have incentivized new strategies. The seeds of the next great revolution, the Neolithic shift to agriculture and settled life, were being sown in this period of adaptation. The intimate knowledge of plants and seasons, possessed by gatherers for millennia, would eventually be applied to cultivation. The social structures necessary for coordinating hunts would later be scaled up to manage harvested crops and stored surpluses. The world of the hunter-gatherer was slowly, inexorably, giving way. Thus, the daily life of 50,000 years ago represents both a peak and a precipice. It was the culmination of hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution as hunter-gatherers, a way of life perfected in the crucible of the Ice Age. It was a time of stunning artistic achievement and spiritual depth, yet it was also a world on the brink of vanishing. The climate was shifting, the megafauna were declining, and other human species were fading away. The resilience and ingenuity forged in this challenging period became the tools that allowed our species not just to survive these changes, but to embark on a new, transformative path that would lead to the domination of the planet. The death of the Pleistocene world made possible the resurrection of humanity into a new age. In the absence of written records, the full complexity of language 50,000 years ago remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Yet, to assume their communication was simple is to underestimate the profound social and cognitive abilities evident in their toolmaking, art, and ritual. Daily life was saturated with a rich exchange of information that flowed through multiple channels, creating a seamless web of understanding that bound the band together and connected them to their environment. Theirs was a world of silent languages, where much was said without a single word being uttered. The primary language was, of course, spoken, while the specific words and grammar are lost. Linguists analyzing the structures of modern languages can make inferences about their deep past. It is highly probable that they had a fully modern linguistic capacity, capable of expressing abstract concepts, discussing events in the past and future, and using complex syntax. This allowed for the precise planning of hunts, the transmission of intricate knowledge about plants and animals, and the sharing of the stories and myths that defined their cultural identity. Language was the ultimate tool for cooperation, enabling a level of social coordination that gave Homo sapiens a critical edge. But words were only part of the story. In a life where stealth was often necessary for hunting and safety, silent communication was essential. A rich lexicon of gestures, hand signals, and facial expressions would have been used to coordinate movements during a hunt, to warn of danger without alerting prey or predators, or to communicate across distances. A slight tilt of the head, a specific movement of the hand, or a meaningful glance could convey a volume of information. This non-verbal language was as fluent and nuanced as their spoken one, a necessary skill for survival learned from infancy. The environment itself was a text to be read, and humans were expert readers. A broken branch, the depth of a footprint in mud, the direction of bird flight, the scent of water on the windwall were meaningful signs. Tracking was not just following a path. It was reconstructing a narrative. The spacing of tracks could indicate the animal's size and whether it was injured. Disturbed foliage could tell how long ago it had passed. This ability to read the subtle grammar of the natural world was a form of literacy as important as any other. It was a continuous silent dialogue between the people and the land they inhabited. Furthermore, communication was embedded in the very objects they created. The style of a stone tool, the way a bead was perforated, or the specific pattern used to decorate a weapon, these were not random. They acted as markers of group identity. A tool made in a specific way communicated, "This was made by my people." This material culture was a silent but powerful language of belonging, instantly recognizable to members of the same band or wider tribal network. It fostered a sense of shared identity and tradition, reinforcing social cohesion without the need for explanation. Perhaps most powerfully, communication was ritualized. The shared experience of a cave painting ceremony, the collective mourning during a burial, or the rhythmic chanting and dancing around a fire were all profound forms of non-verbal communication. These rituals transmitted values, reinforced social bonds, and created a powerful shared emotional experience that words alone could never achieve. They communicated the most fundamental beliefs of the culture about life, death, and humanity's place in the cosmos through action, symbol, and emotion. In this way, their entire world, from the gestures of a hand to the symbols on a wall, spoke in a complex, multi-layered language of existence. Beyond the tangible artifacts of tools, art, and burial sites lies the most intimate and elusive frontier of the past, the subjective experience of the individual. What was it like to be a conscious human being 50,000 years ago? While we can never truly know the quality of their inner thoughts, we can infer from their actions that they possessed a rich, emotional, and cognitive life, one that grappled with the same fundamental human conditions we face today, albeit through a vastly different lens of understanding. Their emotional range was undoubtedly as complex and nuanced as our own. The deep social bonds necessary for survival point to a capacity for powerful love, loyalty, and affection. The care shown to the injured and the elaborate treatment of the dead provide clear evidence for profound grief, compassion, and empathy. The frustration of a failed hunt, the joy of a birth, the anxiety of a storm, the awe of a starry night, these universal emotions would have painted their inner world in vivid colors. These were not primitive brutalities, but feeling individuals who experienced the full spectrum of joy and sorrow, fear and hope. Their sense of self, however, was likely more collective than the hyper-individualism of the modern West. Identity was deeply intertwined with the band and the wider kinship network. To be an individual was to be a son, a mother, a hunter, a gatherer, roles defined by relationships and responsibilities to the group. Their survival depended on this collective unity, fostering a mindset where the success of the individual was inextricably linked to the success of the whole. This does not mean they lacked personal ambition or emotion, but that their conception of themselves was rooted in a web of connections rather than in isolation. Consciousness itself was filtered through a pre-scientific worldview. Without empirical explanations for natural phenomena, their minds sought patterns and agency in everything. This could lead to what we might call magical thinking, the belief that one's actions or thoughts could influence events in the external world. A hunter might believe that dreaming of a successful hunt would make it so, or that performing a specific ritual would ensure good weather. This was not irrationality. It was a logical conclusion based on their understanding of a universe governed by spiritual forces. It was a way of asserting control and finding meaning in a chaotic and dangerous world. This mindset also shaped their experience of time. Their sense of history was oral, carried in the stories of ancestors and the myths of creation. The future was an immediate concern: the next season, the next migration, the next hunt. They lived in a perpetual and intense present, acutely aware of their surroundings. This likely fostered a state of mind that modern mindfulness practices strive to achieve. A deep focused attention on the current moment, attuned to the sights, sounds, and smells of the environment, free from the constant mental time travel that characterizes modern anxiety. Ultimately, their inner world was a landscape of meaning. Every event, from the mundane to the catastrophic, was integrated into a coherent, spiritually charged narrative. The death of a loved one was not a random biological event, but part of a cyclical journey. A successful hunt was a gift from the animal spirits, earned through respect and ritual. This worldview alleviated the terror of randomness and provided a framework for understanding their place in the cosmos. They lived in a universe that spoke to them, and in their art, their rituals, and their quiet moments of reflection, they sought to answer back. Their internal experience was one of constant dialogue with each other, with the natural world, and with the invisible forces they believed shaped their lives. Our journey to understand daily life 50,000 years ago concludes not with a definitive answer, but with a profound appreciation for its complexity and its enduring resonance. The people of this distant era were not merely primitive survivors. They were the architects of the human experience, laying the foundational stones of language, art, society, and spirituality, upon which all subsequent history has been built. Their story is one of incredible adaptation, not just to an external world of ice and giants, but to the internal world of emotion, consciousness, and the relentless need to find meaning. The theme of death and resurrection, which we began with, reveals itself not as a mere abstract concept, but as the central rhythm of their existence. It was observed in the world around them, ritualized in their treatment of the deceased, and ultimately transcended through their cultural and symbolic innovations. Their physical bodies have returned to the earth, but their legacy undergoes a continuous resurrection in our genes, in our social structures, in our capacity for symbolic thought, and in the age-old stories we still tell around proverbial fires. They confronted the void and responded with creativity, compassion, and an unwavering will to live and make meaning. To study them is to engage in the ultimate act of remembrance, a resurrection of memory that honors their struggle and their ingenuity. It humbles us, reminding us that our modern world is a brief moment in a long human story. And it inspires us by showcasing the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming challenges. They mastered their world with nothing but stone, bone, and boundless imagination. The silent echoes of their lives, preserved in cave art and burial sites, continue to speak to us, asking us to remember that before cities, before empires, before written words, there was the band, the fire, the hunt, and the stars. And there was the unshakable hope that life in all its forms finds a way to endure. The story of humanity 50,000 years ago is, therefore, not a closed book. It is a prologue to our present and a guiding light for our future. It reminds us of who we are at our core: storytellers, artists, survivors, and seekers of meaning, forever connected to those first ancestors who dared to paint on walls, bury their dead with love, and look at the moon with wonder. If we could reach back through the millennia and stand unseen at the edge of one of their campsites, what would we see? We would not see a precursor to humanity, a rough draft. We would see us, the weary hunter gently handing a portion of his meal to a child, the elder patiently guiding a young hand to shape a stone tool, the quiet tears of a friend placing a personal ornament in a grave, the shared laughter around the fire as a story is told, its familiar punchline sparking joy, the artist stepping back from the cave wall, satisfied that the spirit of the bison now lives in the stone. We are separated from them by a chasm of time and technology, but we are connected by an unbroken thread of experience. The same emotions that move us, love, grief, curiosity, awe, and hope, moved them. They represent not a stage we passed through, but a version of ourselves that was honed by a different world. They are a testament to the fact that the core of humanity is not defined by what we have, but by who we are. A species that cares for its own, that seeks to create beauty, and that refuses to accept that death has the final word. The world they knew is gone. The great glaciers have receded, the mammoths are dust, and the caves they painted are silent. But every time we feel a sense of wonder at the natural world, every time we come together to mourn a loss and celebrate a life, every time we use a story to teach a lesson or bring comfort, we are breathing life into their legacy. We are the resurrection of their hopes, the living continuation of their story. They are the soil from which we grew, and though we have reached for the sun, we carry their essence within us still. Their daily life may be a mystery we can only piece together, but their humanity is a mirror in which we see our own. As we draw this exploration to a close, it is vital to acknowledge the vast spaces on the map of the past that remain blank. For every fragment of bone, every stone tool, every ochre stain, there are a million stories forever lost to time. The silent gaps in the archaeological record are as eloquent as the findings themselves, reminding us of the humility required to approach the deep past. We have constructed a plausible narrative from the evidence, but it is a narrative that must remain open to revision, to new discoveries, and to the thrilling possibility that we might still be wrong. What were the specific languages they spoke? What melodies did they sing around their fires? What were the precise details of their creation myths? What inside jokes did they share that would never be funny to an outsider? These intimate details of their lived experience are gone, leaving us with the grand architecture of their lives, but not the daily clutter that made it home. This inherent mystery is not a failure of science. It is what makes the study of prehistory so profoundly human. It invites us to wonder, to imagine, and to connect across time with a sense of shared curiosity. The search for answers is itself a form of resurrection. Every time an archaeologist carefully brushes dirt from a flint tool, or a geneticist sequences a new strand of ancient DNA, they are not just collecting data. They are reaching out a hand to those who came before. They are affirming that those lives mattered, that their struggles and triumphs are worth recovering and understanding. This relentless, patient inquiry is a testament to our own species-defining trait, an insatiable need to understand our own story. The daily life of 50,000 years ago, therefore, is not a closed case file. It is an ongoing conversation between the present and the past. The questions we ask today about climate change, about social cohesion, about our relationship with the natural world, illuminated by the long view of deep time. Their resilience in the face of glacial cycles echoes our own challenges with a changing climate. Their intricate social networks mirror our own struggles to build community. Their spiritual seeking reflects our own eternal quest for meaning. In the end, the story of our ancestors 50,000 years ago is a gift. It is a reminder of our incredible journey, of the fragility of civilizations and ecosystems, and of the enduring power of the human spirit to create, to adapt, and to hope. They have left us with a legacy not of answers, but of inspiration. They faced a world of immense beauty and terror and met it with art, compassion, and innovation. They looked into the abyss of death and responded with rituals of life and continuity. We, their descendants, are the living result of their resilience. To honor them is to continue their project, to care for each other, to create beauty, to seek understanding, and to face the future with the same courage and hope that they carried in their hearts. So long ago, under the endless and watchful stars,